Hey, what's going on, boys and girls? So today we're going to take this photo of just some ferns and some trees shot in Yosemite early July, and we're going to turn it into like a vintage, retro, old school kind of feel. And usually I would do these kind of edits with a preset like that, but we're going to do this all from scratch. Obviously with the preset I would tweak a lot of stuff. You know, you never put on a preset and call it good. It's just doesn't work that way. You'd always have to do some more fine-tuning with presets, but they're good starting points. But I don't even know why I'm talking about that, because we're not going to use presets here. So yeah, I want to kind of prepare this image for Instagram, so we're going to make it a 4:5 aspect ratio. So I'm going to hit R on my keyboard to bring up the crop tool, and we're going to go here at the right hand side, change original to 4:5. And I'm going to actually drop down the crop maybe about there. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Alright, so I'm going to change the temperature down to make it just a tad bit cooler. You know what? Let's go warmer on this one. I think it looks better warmer. I did an edit of this earlier where I made it a little cooler, and it looked pretty decent as well. Tint, I'm going to keep the same here. Exposure, maybe just the slightest of bumps to the exposure. Contrast, I'm going to drop -10. If you want that old school feel, you definitely want to drop the contrast, because if you increase the contrast, it's just going to look oversaturated and like pretty fake. So if you're going for that old school style, drop the contrast, boys and girls. So highlights, I'm probably gonna drop those a tad. Shadows, I'm gonna raise a tad. Whites, raise a tad. And black, I'm gonna raise a tad. Alright, so if you've seen my previous videos on the tone curve, or my previous edits where I get into the tone curve, you know that my favorite starting point is just like 3 dots. One right there, one right there, and one right there. And I'm gonna fade the blacks really heavily by taking the leftmost point there and dragging it up. So we're gonna do that, and see, you notice like the blacks start to fade. Like, there's that, right? And then I'm gonna raise the leftmost point, and then the blacks are starting to fade, right? That's step 1 to getting that like old school retro look. And then now we're just gonna mess with the rest of the points. So I start from left to right all the time. I'm going to bring this maybe down and to the left, not making it too dark. Okay, now we're going to grab the middle one, and same kind of thing, maybe like up and to the left just a bit. There we go. We didn't even move that one much. Okay, and then the fourth one, I'm going to bring it up just a bit. And the fifth one, the rightmost point, I'm going to bring it down just the slightest. Okay, now we got this like nice little S curve going, and that's what I usually go for in most of these vintage looks. Now what do I want to do next? Let's kind of mess with clarity. You know what, clarity, I'm going to give a slight boost of 5. Saturation, I'm going to drop -10. And then let's mess with split toning. I am going to try that one right there. That's a preset, and I'm going to change the saturation on that to 11. That's like one of the other default ones. And we're going to come to the shadows, and let's try the light blue. I kind of like that, but I'm going to drop the saturation to maybe like 3. Yeah. So here's before, and then here's after. The slightest of differences, right? I'm actually going to come to the balance and then move it to the left to make it just a tiny bit more cooler. Yeah, honestly, not much of a difference, but it is a good difference, I guess. Now, I'm going to come to the detail module. This was actually shot with my Sony a7R II with a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. And on my on my shoots in particular, I always set the details to around the same settings. Now it might differ from you, and you probably just have to eyeball it most of the time. I mean, like most of editing, honestly, guys, in Lightroom is just like messing with sliders and just sticking with what looks good to you, you know? And that's basically how I do these tutorials. I hope to goodness that someone's learning something, though. If I could educate one person, then I'm happy. Alright, so enough of that small talk. I'm going to bump the sharpening here to like 60. I'm going to hold Alt while moving the mask Okay, and that just tells me like whatever is in black doesn't really get sharpened. And the color here, I always raise to 100. And we're going to scroll down. We're done with detail there. We're going to scroll down. I'm going to press remove chromatic aberration. And chromatic aberration, it only appears on like cheaper lenses. And it's more prominent when you're shooting wide open. But basically, let me see, is there any... I'm trying to look for something in this, but there's not any. Let me open up Google Chrome just to show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's a good example. This is obviously way overdone. Whoops. But you could see that purple fringing, and sometimes it comes in forms of like green fringing. That's chromatic aberration. And I always make sure that's checked in all my images, just because it really doesn't hurt, to be honest. It never really negatively affects your photos. But if there is some chromatic aberration, it will definitely remove it. If it doesn't remove it automatically, you could go in the manual tab and mess with these settings. I hardly ever mess with those settings unless the chromatic aberration is just insanely terrible. And like I said, it only occurs when you're shooting wide open and when you're using cheap lenses. Like, for example, like shooting with a kit lens all the way wide open, you'll definitely notice chromatic aberration. But this image doesn't seem to have any, but I like to check it anyway. So that's like your little lecture on chromatic aberration. Hopefully you learned something. The next checkbox is enable profile corrections. And to be honest, I used to check that every single time just to get rid of distortion in the lens. But to be honest, recently, depending on the photo, I've been leaving it unchecked because I honestly just like the vignetting, the natural vignetting of the distortion, I guess. It looks pretty cool. And, you know, it's all up to you though. It's not a huge difference, as you can see. It just kind of straightened things out just a bit, but obviously you really wouldn't be able to tell. It's more prominent with lenses that are, for example, like really wide, like a 12mm lens. You'll get tons of distortion on a 12mm lens that's like shot wide open, for example. I'm shooting this image at 25mm. And you could see there's a difference, but it's not like you could be able to tell that, oh, like there's so much distortion in this picture, right? It just kind of doesn't work that way. Okay, so I'm going to come down to effects, and we're probably going to drop a vignette on this, like really minor vignette, -10. Call that good. Another thing I want to do is grab my graduated filter with the M key. And I'm going to go from bottom up, maybe just about there, and lower the exposure quite a bit. Give it that like moody feel, if you know what I'm saying. That's good. Love it. So let's just do a quick before and after. Here's the before, and here's the after. So it honestly looks like you shot it from an old film camera, you know, and that's a look that a lot of Instagrammers have been going for recently, and I really like the look. It's kind of weird because people are now using digital software, digital cameras and whatnot to get that analog look, which is pretty interesting the way it works, because it's not only photography that this is really popular in, it's also like, take a look, for example, like music production. You now see people producing like that synth 80s pop wave stuff in the, you know, it's 2017 and people are still producing like those old 80s hits, you know, which were all pretty much done on analog equipment. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, we're going to come all the way down to camera calibration. Honestly, one of my favorite modules in Lightroom because it can give your photos a very nice twang. You could like create your own kind of style solely from the camera calibration. So I actually like to start with the blues. I'm going to desaturate the blues just a bit, and I'm going to change the hue of the blue, maybe that, -19. I'm going to bring the saturation up a bit, and we're going to go work our way up. So I'm going to mess with the hues here. Ooh, I really like that. But honestly, like wherever you go, it looks good. I'm going to move that to the right, make it a little more greener. A little more green. Saturation, I think I'm going to keep at 0. That looks good. And let's mess with red. I'm just going to move to the slightest of left on both hue and saturation. That looks pretty cool. And then I'm going to change the tint to, I'm going to move it to the purple side. gives it more of an analog kind of look. So here's a before and here's an after. I love it, love it. And like, it's not like you're ruining the photo, right? Maybe what I'll do is I kind of want to brighten it up just a bit. Let's see, and I'm going to be using the tone curve here to do that. Maybe move this to the left and up just the slightest, and maybe change exposure to 0.05, or maybe we'll go 0 exposure. Okay, before and after looks pretty nice in my opinion. But yeah, the tone curve does make a huge difference in terms of that like old school analog effect. Anything else that you could do to kind of make it look more vintage? There is one thing that you could do, and that's add grain to the image. I think it's under effects. Yeah, so if you go into effects, you could also add grain. I typically don't do this, but if you really want to beefen up that like old school look, then you could add some grain. Maybe I can't notice it right now, but maybe I got to be liberal with it, or maybe it's just not the greatest picture to use it on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, if I zoom in, you could definitely tell there's grain. I'm going to change that back to 0 though and see how it smooths out again. Yeah, but that's another thing you could use to add more of like an old school flavor to your image. And that's it, guys. I think that's it. Now, with that being said, I'm really never final on an edit. Like, I'd have to let it sit here for maybe an hour, or maybe I'll like publish it somewhere and then I'll come back to it and adjust it to how to what's necessary in my own eyes. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them down below. If you like the video, go ahead and subscribe for more more videos. I do have quite a few coming as part of the 10 minutes or less series that I've been doing recently on my channel, so you might enjoy those. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and like the video. And yeah, guys, follow me on Instagram if you have one. It's actually it's really the only Instagram, the only social media that I use. It's at Mike Goes Outside. I'll post a little pop up here or right here. So go and follow me. I post like nature photos. Sometimes I post like lifestyle photos. Recently, I've been thinking of doing like photo manipulation type stuff. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and I did one like that. That was pretty cool. So if you're into that kind of stuff as well, check me out, guys. All right, I will see you in the next video. Peace.